Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations from the Alcove. My name is Caridad Svich. I am a playwright and also the artistic director of the new play development program at the Lucille Lortel Theater in New York City. The program is called The Alcove, hence the title of this show. If you've been here before, you know it's a series of conversations with theater makers and playwrights mostly on art, life, craft, and the world, not necessarily in that order. Uh, I'll let you know who our guest is today. Their name is Rajiv Joseph. They're an extraordinarily wonderful playwright. But I'll explain a little bit of a technical situation that's happening with the interview today, which is that they're going to be on and off camera at times because of a certain glitch in their side of the computer land. But they'll also, we can hear them just fine. So if you can bear with us in this rather unusual kind of like technological universe, welcome. If you just want to listen to us and don't worry about watching it, that's fine too. A little bit about me, audio description before we launch in, and I do a bio of Rajiv. I'm a fair-skinned person with brownish hair, slightly goldish tones. Today I have it up. I have bangs, brown eyes. I have brown tortoiseshell glasses perched on the tip of my nose. Red lipstick. It's sort of fading today, the red lipstick. I'm wearing a bluish top, blue background top. It's got some images on it, little puppies, I think, today. I decided to go whimsical. And behind me is a white wall that's blurred out, and the outline of a curtain that is also blurred out. It is not a virtual background, but actually a real one. Rajiv, our guest today, is a wonderful American playwright. They were a finalist for the 2010 Pulitzer Prize for Drama for his play Bengal Tiger at the Baghdad Zoo, and won an Obie Award for Best New American Play for his play Describe the Night. They have had numerous works. A lot of their works are political, dark, intense, vivid, beautiful, brilliant, and strange. Not necessarily in that order. Some of their more recent work is Archduke, which will be seen at the Roundabout Theater, but has also been seen at other theaters, including the Wilma and Center Theater Group. Gruesome Playground Injuries, which will be at the Lortel Theater very soon, once this episode airs, but it's also a revival of a play that he wrote in 2009, premiered in 2009 at the Alley Theater in Houston. I'm excited to talk about revisiting a work after such a long period of time. Many other plays, but if I keep saying all the plays, we'll be here forever. I have to mention Guards of the Taj, which is a brilliant play that was at the Atlantic Theater and also had a wonderful, beautiful revival at the Orange Tree Theater in London not too long ago. Okay. So welcome, and I wanted to say we always start the episode with the same question, which is, how is the climate crisis affecting your art practice?
Oh, wow. How is the climate crisis affecting my art practice?
Yes.
I think that the climate crisis fills me with a sort of existential dread, and that is affecting what I'm writing about and how I'm thinking about the world and those around me.
Yeah, indeed. I wanted to sort of think about some of the plays that are, suddenly being seen again or you're working on. I wanted to look at Archduke for a second because it's had sort of a pretty long trajectory in terms of their development. But I don't know if you're still rewriting it or where are you with Archduke after the Wilma production, which was done in Philadelphia?
Yeah, the Wilma production was quite beautiful. And I was really excited by that one. And that was really the first time it had been done since I had revised it extensively after it was premiered almost 10 years ago in Los Angeles. But this time, it hasn't changed and it's not going to change too much from then to now. Just little tiny edits here and there in the rehearsal process that we're in right now.
Okay, indeed. And so that's amazing. I wanted to look at how you got into playwriting in the first place. What drew you to this form?
I was originally going to be a screenwriter. I went to NYU Tisch School of the Arts grad dramatic writing program to be a screenwriter, and not really knowing much about theater or about playwriting. I hadn't, I think, ever seen a contemporary play up until I went to grad school. I had seen musicals and I had seen Shakespeare, but I had never seen the kind of a straight play by a living playwright. And once I went to NYU, I started seeing those plays. I started getting tickets. I started going to theater, and I also really enjoyed my playwriting classes. My professors at NYU were particularly great. Janet Nypris, Gary Garrison, Arthur Kopit, Jeremy Pixer. These were all people who really kind of led me down this path. And so I was really lucky to have good teachers and to be in New York where I could see this kind of great theater.
What was it about seeing work? So some people like start seeing plays very young, or they start reading them. So was it about finally seeing some work on stage that drew you to the form itself? Like, it is different from screenwriting, obviously. So, but it has some similarities in terms of writing for actors and using dialogue and plot and other effects. So yeah, what particularly drew you to the being with a play, like as an audience member?
I was really drawn to the limitations of the form. The fact that you couldn't have too many special effects, that everything had to happen live before an audience, that you had to be really pay close attention to each actor who would be in the play. You don't have any small parts, as it were, and that the sort of challenges of the live performance, the usually very contained performance from smaller theaters, especially when you're beginning as a playwright. You're not going onto some large Broadway stage. You're on little tiny black boxes, and I kind of was drawn to the challenge of it.
Oh, indeed. That's fascinating. I think, right now our industry, well, it's been for a while now, but our industry is, suffering sort of financial pressures,
Mhm.
pressures around censorship, there's all sorts of things that are happening that are affecting this art form that we do, but also the industry itself. And I wonder, why theater? Why keep doing this?
Well, I think for me, theater is that there's a really kind of, for me, spiritual attraction to it. It's a ritualistic event. It's a collaborative event. It's live. It's people in a room experiencing something together that no one else will ever experience in precisely the same way. I find that really interesting. And as AI kind of starts to grow in a mysterious way that I don't think anybody totally understands, maybe my naive belief is that there might be a greater appetite for theater, live theater, going forward, because we know that it's actually something that um, requires living human beings on a stage and living human beings in an audience, and that interaction between people, that sort of communion between people, for it to actually work its magic.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I hope it's not a naive belief. And
Me
it's
too.
actually true. I mean, it's a little bit. Everything feels a little bit like we're. I was reading some article recently where, or maybe it was a friend of mine was telling me. There's this phrase that the scholar Stuart Hall used to say when people are in a conjuncture, and he says the
Mm,
society right now, the world is in a conjuncture. It's sort of at the intersection of all these different things that are about to change or shift or transition, but we're kind of in the middle of that instead of actually through something. And so,
right.
so I think that's why things feel quite even more fraught, perhaps, than usual right now, because there's a lot of confluence right now. I wanted to sort of backtrack just a little bit in terms of before you started writing plays, but I know you were in the Peace Corps for a while, so I wonder, like, your experiences before playwriting, right? So that impact you as a writer.
Yes, well, I went to the Peace Corps just after my undergraduate degree, and spent about 3.5 years in the West African country of Senegal. And more than anything else in my life, I feel like that really changed me and kind of made me into an adult, but also made me into a writer. Not that I was writing plays or even, you know, any kind of creative form while I was there. I was mostly just writing in my journal. But it made writing a real routine for me, and more than that, it made it a sort of survival mechanism. It was how I was able to kind of get through some of the more difficult times of that isolating experience. Peace Corps is a wonderful thing, and it's a beautiful a beautiful experience for most people, I think, who are part of it. But it's also challenging and oftentimes lonely. And so my journal writing was what kept me afloat. And because it became such a routine, and because it became such a part of who I was, it really it set me up for making writing never something that I have to kind of tell myself to do. It's always it's always like almost a luxury for me to be able to sit down and write.
Yes, yes, that's beautiful, beautifully said. And I think this notion of the writing space as one that can nourish and nurture a soul, and also hopefully maybe that nurturing also extends itself to eventually, if that writing meets a reader or an audience, right, or a viewer, that a kind of it transmits something. What was being nurtured through you is actually re-nurturing for the audience, if you understand what I mean. I wanted to sort of think about you have a beautiful body of work, a quite extensive one, even by most standards. And I wonder what led to, there's a trajectory around your work that I'd like to look at a little bit around how you stage and represent violence, violent acts, but also violent speech. And it sort of develops in different ways in the plays. And I wonder if that's something that you were like consciously thinking about as you work on, let's say, when you worked on Bengal Tiger, or when you worked on Gruesome, or when you even Archduke, right? Like, are those things that you were like consciously going, I'm thinking about these things and I want to think about how to represent violence? Or does the violence in the work and the world of violence that you're writing, violences that you're writing, just manifest and you're kind of following your muse? How do you go about the craft of it, but also the theatricality of it?
That's such an interesting question. I would say I don't know if I've actually given it that much thought, except that I think your second option of how it manifests through whatever I'm doing, I think that seems more correct. I think I'm not drawn to violence or to violent acts. I don't set out to write anything about that, but sometimes the stories that grab my attention are stories that deal with violent acts, or that have kind of life or death stakes in which people find themselves in really dangerous territory. I think probably the play of mine that is like enacting this violent sort of atmosphere, or kind of necessitates acts of violence the most, is my play Guards of the Taj, which includes a real gruesome scene of men cleaning up a massacre, basically, and mopping up blood that they have shed. And it's also a sort of clown scene, and there's a kind of dark humor to it. And so I'm drawn to both like the life and death stakes of these acts of violence, but also to the absurdity within it. I think that absurdity is something that I find theatrical and interesting, and maybe it's that the violent world that we live in, the world in which violence happens every single day, everywhere around the world, and in such random and careless ways, is in and of itself absurd. And so maybe in an attempt to make sense of it, I started engaging with that absurdity.
Yeah, indeed. I wanted to sort of extend this a little bit to, obviously, one of the focuses of today's chat is gruesome playground injuries. And there are a couple of things that I'd love to touch on with this play. First of all, revisiting a play from 2009, what does that feel like as a writer, number one? And I know if it's had other productions since then, so since its premiere in Houston, but you're a different person now than you were then, right? So I think that as writers, sometimes we come back to work and we go like, oh, that was me, like that back then I wrote this play, right? And so I think the other part of the question has to do with, so one, revisiting it, two, we're in a different space in geopolitics, right? And so this play kind of presents itself, and I know it's an intimate story about these two childhood friends, but we're situated in a different space and time, right? So I wonder what that feels like also. So maybe we'll start there before we continue. So yeah, both of those, revisiting it, and also geopolitically, how does this place sit with you now?
Well, personally, I mean, it does feel like kind of taking a little time machine and going back in time to something I wrote a long time ago. And it's great. I mean, I'm really excited for that. I'm excited for the opportunity for it. It's always been my intention that this play kind of exists in a timeless place. It's clearly in a play that takes place in a kind of normal town, as it were, but it doesn't have dates. It doesn't have there's nothing mentioned in the play that could locate it particularly in any one specific place, or locate it within the political or cultural moment that it would or would not be in. So there's a detachment to the play that I think is part of its success, or at least part of its ability to be done kind of in lots of places. It's also been done in a lot of different countries, in a lot of different languages. And to me, that's always the mark for me personally of something that I feel very proud of, is a play that can span different cultures. Not all my plays can do that, and sometimes that's fine. I wrote a play called King James about two guys in Cleveland talking about basketball, and I don't expect that to necessarily be done in Japan. But I have had other plays done in Japan and Russia and Iran, and I love it when a play of mine that I've written in English for an American audience can find its way into a place very different than ours.
Yeah. There's something about whenever I think about Gruesome, Playground Injuries as a play, I remember seeing the production that was done at Second Stage in New York, which is quite beautiful production. And it's an intense play, but there's also something, this might seem odd, maybe it isn't odd, but something quite tender about the play. A sort of these two friends are really trying to connect with one another, and they're really trying to find spaces of healing with one another, even sometimes when what happens to them is quite remarkably intense, both either emotionally or physically. And so there's something in that tenderness that keeps kind of drawing me back to this play. And I wonder in the conception of it, like, I mean, you might be tired of this question because, the play's been with you for so long, but, forgive me for asking it again. But like, what led you to this play? Like, what made you want to write it?
Well, it was a pretty simple genesis, to begin. It was a friend of mine who was telling me about his injuries that he experienced as a child, that I had known him for a long time, and I had never known he had some of these really spectacular and unique and awful, playground injuries, as it were. And many of them are included in my play. And so so something about when he was kind of going through this litany of his injuries, I remarked that, like, if he wrote a memoir, every chapter could be an injury, because they sort of marked his life in a way. And then I started thinking about that idea about injuries kind of marking time, and then it kind of led me to this idea of, like, well, could injuries or physical pain or emotional pain also mark a sort of a relationship? And then all these other questions started popping up. It's as if I had fallen on some fertile ground, at least within my own head, about the question of why some people might hurt themselves to gain the affection of another person. And I think that's really at the heart of Gruesome Playground Injuries. And so that led to the sort of construction of it, and it was really fun to find my way jumping around in time, and giving each age that Doug and Kayleen live a certain traumatic event.
Yeah. Fascinating and quite. Was it written quickly, just out of curiosity? Was it?
Yes, it was. One of those is, meaning it was the only play of mine that I feel was written quickly. Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it still took several years to really develop, but that it kind of came out in a real flurry, and I was kind of stunned by it, and I've never experienced that with any other play. It is one of a kind for me in that way.
Yeah, really, really interesting. I always think about the relationship that playwrights have to time, and the gestation of a work, but also in the articulation of it. And I know sometimes, I was just chatting with Simon Stevens the other day, and we were talking about the gestation period sometimes taking months and years, right? You're dreaming about a subject, or you're dreaming about a story, or you're writing notes, but you know it's a play, but you're not ready to write it yet, but you're kind of doing all that pre-work in a way, kind of dedicated pre-work, right?
Right.
And then there's that moment where you write, and that can take sometimes months, weeks, depending on what your process is like. And then there's, of course, the process of actually developing and making it a thing. And I wonder, maybe you can, for folks who are listening in, who are, are budding playwrights or playwrights themselves and are kind of like, oh, I'm working on a play, why isn't it coming out yet? And like all that stuff. And some advice you can give people about like how to have patience with yourself as a writer, but also some tactics to sort of stay with the play over a period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could give like the sort of like the great advice that will save everyone. But even for myself, I find that it's always different with every play. So some plays like Gruesome might come out in a flurry and just suddenly it's there. And even if it's not totally done, I know that this is really it. And in other plays, I have to tear apart and start again. I take characters out, I add characters. Sometimes I change the entire idea of the play. And I allow myself to do that. And I think part of it is allowing yourself to throw out what you don't want. I think that a common feeling of reading what you've written is contempt for what you've written, looking at it and being like, oh my God, this is shit. And that feels so terrible. It really does. It stops us in our tracks. But there can be a liberating quality to that. This is shit, so I get to throw it away and I get to actually make it better. Or I get to keep the one little thing, the one little description, the one little stage direction, the one little cuss word that I think is perfectly placed. I can keep that and take away everything else and then start again. And I think that's useful. And I also think that like by throwing things away, by the term killing your darlings is it's a useful but also destructive term if you're not thinking about it in a productive way, which for me is that there's no such thing as throwing things out. There's no such thing as killing your darlings. In the creative mind of you, the playwright, there's a lot of reincarnation. So everything that dies comes back to life as something else. So never think of your work as wasted. Never look at a draft of a play and be like, I hate all of this. I have to throw it all out. I wasted the last 3 months of my life writing this. No, you didn't. All of that is cumulative. All of that goes into what I've kind of sometimes called the creative cauldron. And within that, it's always cooking, and you can always go back to it. And it might not feel like it's going to help you today, but one day it will. And so I just feel like that's really important to hold on to, is that even at our lowest ebb, when we don't like what we've been working on, it can lead to something else, and you can feel free to discard it and just throw it all away, because with the knowledge that it's actually not being wasted, it's actually being used.
Yeah, and there's also plays lead to other plays, right? So when you're writing, right, maybe you're working on an idea for one, and then I can't quite figure it out, but then you're like, oh, wait a minute, I can turn that into this other play, right? So sometimes it's not that conscious, right? Our unconscious also does a lot of work as writers, but I think that there's something valuable about, again, combating that feeling of I've wasted my time. You're not wasting your time. You're actually going through a process with something. Right. And it may be that you don't have the right container for that idea, right? Exactly. And you're working on something and then you find it with another play, right? And so I think that it's, but I do understand about beating ourselves up as writers, because we do it, and it's inevitable, right? It's an inevitable part of the process. Because fear and doubt and uncertainty is part of being a writer. I wanted to sort of touch on like how you, speaking of fear and doubt and uncertainty, talk about like how you navigate the business side of playwriting, which is complex and intense and quite difficult, and also at a time when I hear from so many playwrights that are like, what should I write so that it's successful? Do you know what I mean? Like people are looking for the formula or looking for the thing that will be the it, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that sometimes, well, first of all, how can you predict that? And second of all, I almost feel like it's a backwards way of writing, but I don't know, maybe it's not. How do you go about it?
Well, it is. I mean, it is a great question, and it's and I don't think there is. I don't think it's possible to say I'm going to write something popular. It's impossible to gauge the the appetites of an audience or of a moment. And the easy answer is like, oh, write two-handers. Like I write a lot of two-handers,
You
but
do.
I'm not. But I am honest when I say that I'm not writing them because I think they're more easily produced. Oftentimes they start as larger plays, and I find that some characters just aren't earning their way into the story. And so to me, every writing process is sort of like a winnowing away of what is inessential. And I've ended up with a lot of two-person plays as a result of that. That said, I've written, I think, 5 two-person plays, but only 2 of them have had any kind of even remotely commercial life. 3 of them never get done, and so it's not really, that's not necessarily a way in. And then you look at something like a magnificent piece like Stereophonic, which is one of the most successful American plays in years, and that there's something wildly impractical about that play. But David Adjemi kind of, like, in a very bold and brave way, said, I'm going to write what I want to write. I'm going to write what I want to see on stage, and it's going to come from a deep part of me. And I think if playwrights are doing that, if they're writing what they want to see on stage, and they're writing from a deep place within themselves, that's a good place to start.
Yeah, and I think that feeling of the profound place from where the work is coming from communicates on the page. So if somebody's reading that play, sometimes, as we know, plays, I should say, end up first in the hands of readers often. And so, that sense of like, oh, this feels real, this feels genuine, this feels like it's coming from a center, as opposed to work that sometimes one reads and feels like it's hiding, right? That's sort of, or it's trying to be something else that it is not organic in a sense. It's so tricky, this business. And I think about, like, so the two-handers thing is interesting because I didn't realize that you wrote some of them and then cut characters out, because I find two-handers personally quite fascinating, and they're actually challenging to write. They take a lot of stamina from the writer, and you have to keep the ball moving, and there's no other third character, there's no other place to, and so I kind of love it, but a lot of people have told me, oh, two-handers, that's so easy. I'm like, what are you talking about?
No.
They're insanely difficult to, have you, because I think the joy of them often is that you're just like, wow, like that held me for this amount of time. And like, I never wavered, and like I was there with it. And for the actors, it's a workout, right? So, it's a really intense workout for actors, so in a beautiful way, I think. So I think the technicalities of the two-handers, there's some gems you can offer about, since you've written several. You're an old hand at the two-handers. How do you, when you know that you're writing one, let's say, you realize, oh, it's finally a two-hander, I get it. Okay, that's what it is. Like, how do you meet it technically on the page?
Well, I have only one of my two-handers is a single scene in real time. And that's the hardest thing to do. And I will never willingly do it again. It's, I think that one of the great, like the ones of mine that I think work is ones that employ the passage of time. And so, like, you see, you're getting to witness how these two people have changed over time, in a compressed period. But it's just going to be different with each play. And I don't think anyone should set out to write a two-person play. You just need to set out to write the play you want to write. And then I think, like it's always a challenge. It's like, how much can I take away? And if I take away something, is it really diminishing it, or am I actually making it stronger? And that's how I've always felt about these two-person plays. I mean, Gruesome was always going to be a two-person play, as with King James. But Guards of the Taj started off as like a 10-person play, and it slowly kind of got winnowed down. And I was like, I hate this whole play. I just like the two smallest characters, these two guards that I put on either side of the stage to just kind of like stand there the whole time, and in between scenes chat with each other. And I was like, they're the only two legitimate characters here. Everyone else is a symbol of something that I thought needed to be said, and isn't like a real full-fleshed person. So I was like, let me just get rid of everything else and try it like this. And that's how that play came to be.
Wow. So was that discovery made in obviously the writing process, but also in the development process? Like, were you developing the play as a 10-person play?
No. I was just writing it on my own. I was a part of the Dramatists Guild Fellowship workshop, which we would come in every other week or so and share new pages. And to that degree, I was workshopping scenes from the larger play and slowly realizing that they weren't working in the way that I wanted them to. I discarded the play for a long time, came back and reread it a couple years later and was like, well, this is all terrible. What if I just take away everyone but these two guys? And then it became a play that I thought was going to work.
Fascinating. So cool. Yeah. And I think this thing of having distance from the play also helps the revision process. Because we can sort of look at it and go, oh, I see what that is, but I've had some time away to figure it out. I'm interested in that process also with Archduke, because of course it had premiered in LA. And then you have the span of time and then you revise it. So, what led to that? Because, sometimes when we premiere work, we go, well, that's done. It's done. It's over. Right. Like we think, as writers, we move on. But like, what made you kind of come back to the play and look at it again?
No one was doing it.
Oh, boo. I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, I mean, I always kind of think that if no one's doing it, there's my feeling is like, well, they don't like it. So what is it about this that I could make better? And so I just like, maybe it's just not done yet. And so it just got me working on it again. I've just come from not the world premiere, but the Chicago premiere of my play, Mr. Wolf.
Right, at Steppenwolf, right?
Yes, at Steppenwolf. Yes, at Steppenwolf.
Well,
and
Mr.
that's
Wolf
a play. Exactly. And it was a play that hasn't been done in 10 years. And that was the same impulse. I was like, no one's doing this play. No one's going to look at it anymore. Maybe I need to look at it and see, could I make this better? And I think I legitimately made the play a lot better, as I did with Archduke. And the revisions for Archduke weren't so much, it wasn't always just about me though. Blanka Ziska, who was the former artistic director of the Wilma and who directed Archduke at the Wilma, was one who approached me about the play and during the pandemic, and she was going to do some workshops with it. And she just had lots of incisive questions, dramaturgical concerns that opened up a conversation between us that really made me, rethink it.
Fascinating. So Blanca gave the call, and you were like, "What are you thinking, Blanca?" And that led to a useful conversation, and in a different iteration of the piece. I'm fascinating about Mr. Wolf. Yes, it premiered in 2015, right? At South Coast Rep. Am I right about the date on that?
Mr. Wolf, yes.
Yeah, Mr. Wolf. Yeah, and so now it's at Steppenwolf, and in a different version, which I didn't realize. So it's not the same version that was done at South Coast.
No, it's not.
Oh wow, super cool. What a luxury. I mean, I think that sometimes as writers, we don't get that chance to revisit the work unless we're asked or we're in a position where we can. I remember briefly a play of mine that had premiered already, and I kind of thought, I had that feeling of it's done. You know what I mean? It's done.
Yeah.
I'm out in the world. And then there was a production of it in Austin, and a wonderful director, asked me some pretty tough questions about the play that no one had ever asked me before. And I was like, wait a minute. You mean I could change that? and suddenly, I think that's also that thing of allowing yourself permission, because I think sometimes after a work premieres, or it's had several productions after initial premiere, you feel like maybe I shouldn't touch it, right? Like there's a sort of a preciousness about it. And but then you're like, well, what's so precious about it? It's just work, right? Like you can move it around, you can shape it differently, you can make it better, as you say. And I think that is also an act of giving yourself permission as a playwright to do that, without feeling that you're gonna, sometimes people say to me, "Oh, destroy the impulse of the play." I don't know if you've heard that expression. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm gonna wreck what started it and get back in there. And it's like, no, it's just a piece of art and you're just trying to make it better. Right. So, but I wonder if you've ever had that feeling of like preciousness around the work. I mean, or a feeling of maybe I'll rephrase that, maybe around protection of the work, preserving it in some way, and not making sure that it's going to run into the wrong hands.
Yes, I think that I have had examples of me myself sometimes throwing the baby away with the bathwater. Maybe doing revising too much, or revising in too manic a way, because I have I feel intolerant towards the way the play is making me feel. But mostly I feel like I'm working towards making it better. In working in television and film, which I enjoy, but I don't enjoy in the same way as I enjoy theater. The tragic thing about TV and film for me is that once it's done, and there is nothing you can do about it. And I think, again, one of the lovely things about theater is that it's every production, every performance is unique and different. And if you are a living playwright and someone's doing your work and you have the inclination to change it, you can do that. And I just find a great deal of satisfaction and liberation around that idea.
There's also, yes, indeed. I mean, with film and TV, it's sort of, once it's shot, and you don't get the chance to. I mean, let's reshoot the entire thing.
Yeah, no, that's never going to happen.
It's not going to happen. It costs too much money. It's too much, it's too logistical nightmare. But there's sometimes that feeling of like, oh, I wish we reshot that one thing, and like, all that stuff. But sometimes you don't get the chance to do it, and also there's no money behind that.
Right.
But wouldn't it be fun if you could do that?
It would be great.
It would be amazing. We do have the technology now to do things quickly, but a lot of it is about scheduling and time and people.
Right.
I wanted to sort of move into a different area here, which is, this might seem like an unusual question, but not so much, is that I think that there's a lot of your work. There's a sense of, yes, there's people sort of being in relationships that are damaging, or situations that are damaging to them. But there's also people in those same situations searching for love and searching for the core of humanity, and not falling into the acts of brutality and barbarianness. And so I wonder how you temper that as a writer. Like, is that conscious? Are you, when you're crafting the play, are you like, oh, that was like 3 violent scenes in a row, maybe I need some love here? Or is it just coming through the writing?
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel like it's I'm heading towards, I hope I'm heading towards a either a sense of redemption, or or I'm going to sit in the uncomfortable reality of tragedy. And I don't know exactly. I never know which one I'm going to do, really. I feel like sometimes my Achilles heel is my own sentimentality, and my own desire for kind of happy endings. And I sometimes buck against that. But I think that, I was raised in a very Catholic family, and the Catholic liturgy, I think, had a really early and formative effect on the way I understand story. And the Catholic liturgy and the stories in the New Testament, especially, and I guess in both Testaments, really, but I was kind of raised more as as a Christian, as a Catholic in the New Testament. These are stories of betrayal and torture and death, and then redemption and resurrection. And so I think that maybe unconsciously I am exploring that dynamic as well.
Yes. I know all the Catholic stuff. It's funny as I think about, like, sometimes when I think, I was raised Catholic as well, and went to Catholic school, did all those things, and sometimes I think, no, it's not in my writing. And then I read my plays, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's everywhere in my writing. Yeah. It's like you can't escape it. Like that formative. Yeah. There's a formative, in a way, formative scripts that you're encountering as a child and adolescent that shape the way you think about the world. I wanted to segue here in our last few minutes together about maybe it's too big of a question, but maybe we can touch on it slightly, which is, I think of your work as being boldly walking into the worlds of geopolitics with quite astuteness and ferocity. And I think that sometimes that's shied away from, or playwrights are being told to shy away from that in their work for a variety of reasons. And so I wonder what keeps you steady and centered around, yes, I will face the world, and yes, I will speak to the challenges in it, and yes, I will document and testify, as well as have fun, right? Like King James is fun, and it's about love and devotion, and like what, how these star players like LeBron, inspires camaraderie and friendship, right? So it's not just always darkness and heaviness, but I wonder, what keeps you steadfast in your documentation work.
Well, I guess it's somewhat what interests me is I'm really, I don't know if I'm a political junkie, but I try to pay attention to what's going on in the world, and I am also interested in history, and I'm interested in the way that the past and the present, are connected, and how we can learn or try to learn from stories in the past. That's what led me to so many of my more political works, like Archduke and Describe the Night and Guards at the Taj, going back in time. It's funny, Bengal Tiger was written in the moment as a contemporary moment play, but it's being done in London this winter, and now it's a period piece. It's 20 years old almost, and so it's funny how that can happen as well. But I guess that the trick is, and I know that like we're in a particularly fraught moment right now, politically and culturally, in this country and in the world. And there's a desire, I think, on a lot of people, playwrights, novelists, poets, to confront that head on with their work. And I certainly applaud it. But for myself, I have to caution myself, because from a very practical point of view, as is per the design of those in power right now, the topic of conversation changes daily. And so it's hard to write to the moment when the moment is a whirling dervish. And we are meant to stay confused. And so I think that, that's why I think looking to the past, it doesn't have to be 100 years ago, it could be 10 years ago, but trying to hold on to a moment and portray it might be useful, at least to me. And also I think that one thing that nobody wants as an audience is a lecture, or a lesson. I am not smart enough or educated enough to really inform anyone about anything. But I do have, I think, particular skills in, creating characters for actors and creating a framework for those characters to, tell a story. And I think that when those stories work, at least in this way that you're talking, there is a depth of like, maybe provocation or contemplation that can occur. But I think that for me, it's always about like, I don't want to resurrect everything I want to read in the paper every day into a play. It just takes too long to write a play. And so it's to me, it's a challenge. I wish I knew how, and I'm currently trying to figure it out. Is, that selection of material is to me the most important thing. It's the most important part of judgment, or maybe your skill as a writer is deciding what in fact to spend your time writing about. And I don't always make the right choice, but when I do, I think I feel it early on and realize, oh, this is something I want to continue with.
Yes, thank you for that lovely answer. We're almost at time, but I just want to piggyback on one thing you said, which is the feeling of the writing, right? So there's two things around that. So one of them has to do with the fact that when you're working on something, I don't think it's arrogant to say that sometimes you just know that something feels good and it might communicate it, it might reach
Mhm.
people. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're writing, you're like, this is hot. I think this will
Yeah.
count, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that's an arrogant thing to say. I think we just
No.
feel it, right, as writers. And I think the other part of that is, so I want to ask if how many times you felt that. And the other part is, sometimes one thing that I'm always interested in is when you finish a draft of a play,
Mhm.
and there's I don't know if you have this, but I just feel adrift. I just feel like, what am I doing with my life? What is happening?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because something feels like you've reached end of play, basically. And of course it's going to have a rewrite and all those things. But in the moment, you're like, oh, I've spent all these years or months or weeks working, and oh, here it is, right? And so sometimes there's that feeling of feeling listless after you've finished a draft. So I wonder how you negotiate the hot feeling of writing and that feeling of like, oh, now what?
Right. Right. Well, the hot feeling is certainly a great feeling, and but it's too often followed by that listlessness or that feeling of like, oh, this wasn't as good as I thought it was, and those things you have to just kind of tolerate both, I think. But for me, one thing I like to do is, and it's a little trick, because I think when you're feeling that hot feeling, it means that you're really in it, and you're like, it's occupying so much of your conscious and unconscious mind, and then you put it down for a while, and then you're going to pick it up. Say it's going to be a week later or a month later or several months later sometimes. In any case, some time has passed and it's gone cold. It's not on your mind so much, but now you're starting to like go back to it and look at it. What I try to do is, before I look at it, before I open up the document on my computer, I open a blank document. I just spend 10 or 20 minutes writing a series of things to myself. Like, here's what I think this play is about. Here's what I want this play to be about. Here's what I think doesn't work in this play. Here's what I think does work in this play. Here's the things I need to work on. Here's what I'm hoping to get. And kind of like a kind of an assessment from a distance. Because once you open that and you read it again, you've wrecked that distance. You've thrown that kind of strategic advantage of having distance away. So I think it's important to like understand the distance as an advantage, as something that you can use, so that you can then write that document. And then I read the draft again, and I realize, oh, I was kind of wrong about some things. There's some things that are working that I thought weren't working, and there's some things that aren't working that I did think were working. So it's like you can then have a conversation with yourself about the piece, and that helps. That helps. It's like two versions of yourself can then be in dialogue.
Yeah, I love that. I love this assessment page. I've never thought of that. That's such an exciting thing to do, and it makes total sense, right? Like it's almost like from memory, you're asking yourself these questions before you look at the document. Yeah.
Right.
Instead of, I think what a lot of us tend to do, which is we look at the document and we obsess over it.
Right.
And then we do the assessment page.
Right.
So super cool. I love this. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Rajiv. We really appreciate it. I know you're incredibly busy. We still look forward to Gruesome Playground Injuries at the Lortel. Please come see it, folks. If you're listening, and if you're in New York, obviously. And yes, and always, and of course, continued success with all your work. And for those of you that are listening to Conversations in the Alcove today, thanks for hanging in there. If you're watching, you've got to see an hour of me instead of two people on screen, but listening intently, and it's all fine. Thank you so much, Rajiv. Really appreciate it. And for now, say so long.
Thank you, Caridad. So lovely talking to you. Bye-bye.
Yay. Bye.